It's so true that when we allow for life to dictate us with the level of no noise and no commentary, you should be suspicious. Well, there's two things that are pretty counterintuitive as far as I'm concerned. One is that when we're reactive, when we're threatened, when our head's completely up our ass, that's usually the time that we strut out all our authority and we fight for our point of view as if we're making sense. So you watch people get into huge arguments and self-righteous and sanctimonious about what they're saying when they're completely constricted and reactive. It's a strange behavior, but it's intrinsic to all human beings. That's what we do, and it's always shocking, and it's usually socially awkward and everything else. But the person who's delivering this reactive message thinks they're so on point and so intelligent and making such great sense when they're just being more triggered by whatever's going on. And
so basically me a few minutes ago is what you're saying.
Yes, exactly, Brian. Right. We weren't really talking about you right now, but if you need to say something about yourself, then please feel free.
Well, I'm feeling left out, so I want to make sure I'm here.
Just make some noises or bodily functions every 5 minutes so you feel like you're actually contributing to this. All right. So, and that's one thing. And then the next thing is, it's a quote that I wrote just a little bit ago. And it goes like this, and I'm even paraphrasing my own quote, but whatever. That when we're triggered, reactive, feeling competitive where we're not competitive, trying to promote ourselves in a way that isn't really consistent with our skill set or with our self-expression, when we're reactive, per se, we're all equal. All of us are equal. And we do one of three things. We either get aggressive, we withhold, or we get confused. When we're in that state, when we're in a state of reactive behavior, triggered behavior, and any kind of head up your ass context, we all do the same exact thing. Now, here's the deal. Most people kind of know what I'm going to use this metaphor when they're in the deep end of the pool, meaning when they're really, really, really engaged and threatened and how they're acting, even though their pride might not let them admit it, or they won't acknowledge it, or they won't reveal it. But it's a shallow end of the pool. It's when it's subtle, when it looks logical, when it looks like there's geometry to it. That's very hard to discern that your head's up your ass or that you're in a reactive state or triggered. And those are obviously the most interesting. I always look at it like this, that they're like threads. Like there's this thing called a Nain rug. It's a Persian rug, and I think it's like 150 knots per square inch, handmade. So it's those knots, it's those tiny little threads that make up the whole pattern. Well, that's true for us too. So we don't look at the shallow end of the pool enough. We don't look at the subtleties of when we're reactive or triggered. We only really look at the headlines when it's really, really severe. So the quote, so back to the quote, goes like this: when we're triggered, reactive, threatened, we're all equal. We either get aggressive, we withhold, or we get confused. When we're freed up, meaning when there's no noise in our head, when there's no commentary, when we're literally have, are creative and fully expressed, we're completely unique in our sui generis individual expression. And that's when you're most yourself, you're most distinct. That's when you distinguish yourself out. Not when you're actually triggered and reactive. So it's these things are so fascinating in terms of human behavior and watching how we are, what we think is us. Although this is me, and I'm going, well, that's you on drugs. Let's
maybe pull on that a bit. So the other day you were talking in in the seminar about how, people can't always tell when they're in survival. And I think that shallow in the pool, as you call it, like we know that the big ones, the big splashes in our life that we can, when everything falls apart, we're having a big breakdown, it's very obvious that those things happen. But when you can't tell, it's the little subtle things when you're actually in survival, your head's squarely up your ass and you don't know you're in it, but people think they're due. And you were talking the other day about how people are in this sense that they think that's themselves, right? So I wanted to maybe talk a little bit more about how people are in the fog of their survival, and what does it look like? Is it for them? Is it everything's the same? Looks like, how do they know they're in the shallow end of the pool?
Well, if we look at, and I think that's super important, obviously, for people to be able to discern, what is me, what's truly me, what that authentic self, all those things, those expressions, those kind of vernacular, the nomenclature that we started to use to try and determine what's the essential you and what's the distorted personality disorder. So understanding that is obviously just what you said, Brian, is really essential. Well, just like in anything that someone's good at, or I'm going to say good at, and when I determine what someone's good at, it means that they have no internal commentary. They don't have no noise. They don't have good noise or bad noise, because good noise you're trying to keep around, bad noise you're trying to get rid of. They don't have, any of that. That's like, so someone's a rock band, the person's not trying to remember their lyrics when they're playing in front of 60,000 people, or their guitar licks, or someone's not remember their lines when they're, acting in a particular way. Someone's not, trying to think of what they should say when they're asking someone out on a date. So I think we all understand that. Now, where it gets foggy, or as you said, foggy or confusing, is when one has no critical thinking skills. So it means like, I'm a surgeon and I'm just going to use a saw for everything. I'm not going to have any real distinction in that. So usually we have those critical thinking skills when we're freed up in those areas. It's when we don't, when the commentary comes in and we think we're having critical thinking skills, when everything's collapsed. And so what that looks like is, I've got to know the areas that I'm sensitive to. I'll say susceptible to, in terms of where noise or commentary or threat can set up residence. So sometimes it sets up residence in your health. That's what a hypochondriac is. What is that? A headstone for a hypochondriac is, I told you I was sick. I want my headstone to be, I knew this would happen, right? So a hypochondriac is always, every little tick, every little tell, every little thing means something. It's got implication about their health. Well, that's got no critical thinking skills. So mostly it's all collapsed. So there's just black and white. And when you're under threat, when you're engaged, it is either black or white. You go to extremes. It's either this or that. So when we talk about more down the road in additional podcasts, where we'll talk more about the whole core series. A core default is that. Core default is when you go to extremes. So and that means you're going to one side of the tracks or the other side of the tracks, but they're both threatened sides. So someone could have a core default where they're entitled a lot of times and they act very entitled, and then other times they act sacrificial. So those two extremes are both triggered states. And I'm just using that as an example. There's like many examples of core defaults, right? Where you default to one side or the other. But when you're triggered, when you're reactive, when you're threatened, you don't have any critical thinking. So it's all black or white. When you're freed up, when you have no noise, no commentary, you have all access to all the different colors, all the different sides. You can mix it up, as opposed to you only have these two extremes. So, we just don't understand that enough. As I said, you want to really recognize where you're predisposed to where what I'll call this animal of survival. I like the animal of survival.
I like animal too. Yeah. I like that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. It gives it a little more dimension, gives it more three-dimensional. And you can even describe the animal, right, in a certain way. Like, is it,
exactly.
If it's feral and ferocious, is it more like a tiger? Is it more like an elephant? Is it slow moving? Does it act like this? Does it act like that? And then it gives it more dimension to understand it. But understanding where you're predisposed to where it sets up residence, that would be the first stage. Oh, I'm more susceptible in intimate relationships. Now that could happen because of trauma. That can happen, for all sorts of reasons. I don't really look at why. That's more of a therapeutic distinction of why you are predisposed in certain areas. I might visit that. I'm more interested in that you're predisposed there, and that we're dealing with it more on a present day phenomena rather than a historical one, even though the historical one has relevance. And then looking to see like, this animal that we just talked about, this animal survival sets up residence in intimate relationships. It sets up residence in the area of family. As soon as you have children, you watch this animal come into place. It sets up residence in the area of money, or in career, or craft, or or all sorts of other areas. Can't think of all of them right now, but this is mostly the headlines of your life.
Yeah, and I was going to just say, just experiencing your work, right, and trying to be in your work over the last couple of decades, it took a long time for me to get the sense that I wasn't myself, right? Because I was really allied to all those behaviors. I was thinking, like, I should be going to myself. I'm the authority here. I understand what's going on. This is what should be happening. I had all these communications as if I was the one who was the most credible in that scenario. But because I was under threat, I had no critical thinking, right? As you say, I went to myself when I should have been going to others. And it took me a really, really long time. And you've taught me that around how to get that distinction between when you're really authentically you and you have that critical thinking versus when the animal's up and running, right? And that survival system's taking charge. And then at that point, you should be going to others. You shouldn't be going to yourself.
Yeah, but that's when most people, that's what I was saying initially about where people argue for their point of view when they're the most screwed up and drive, there's some level of what they consider intellect and intelligence when they're the most insane. And no, that's usually not when we reach out, because there's pride and there's exposure and scrutiny and your deficiencies and all of those things that one is walking around trying to protect, that you don't reach out. And yes, why would it go to you, for any kind of credibility about you? You're looking outwards. You're looking that way. Other people are looking at you. And you want to go to people who are really have a much better sense of you. You don't want to go to yourself because you're just going to keep recycling your own point of view. You're just, all you have is your reference is you and your experience and everything else. So you're limited in terms of what you can see and what you can hear and what you know. And that is almost impossible because we just think we're so brilliant about ourselves. And I'm the last person I'm asking about myself. I'm always saying, if I'm looking out to mentors or people that I trust, I'm saying, do you think I'm doing okay? I'm all right. And I've had people say, no, I'm concerned about you. Right. And that's, that's a sobering conversation for me to look at. Well, what are they concerned about? Because I think I'm doing great. So if you look at, we'll call the Facebook culture, which is quite fascinating, right? Because Facebook has made its billions on popularity. It's monetized popularity in a very particular way, right? And someone takes their own dysfunctions and creates something. So Zuckerberg not feeling particularly, popular and geeky, decided to this is an important fucking thing for me. Excuse my language. This is an important thing for me to have. So, and it's formatted in still photographs. So that's what it was. So someone would take a picture of them having an enormously great time in Greece, which has nothing to do with what came before it and has nothing to do with what's coming after it. But because we're a culture of believing in the still photograph rather than the moving picture, we're talking to each other as if this is an accurate account of what's going on. And it's not an accurate count. As I said, you don't know, it doesn't count for what's coming before it or what's coming after it. And then you have people interacting with that still photograph of you as if that's the actual truth. Well, someone could be at the top of their profession. I just actually did this with one of my clients just recently. They have a partner, right? And the partner is, kind of alienating them in a certain way. And I said to him about 5 months ago, I'm very concerned about this person, that they're on a decline. And in the culture, they're at the height of their profession. They're getting all these accolades. They're getting all this kudos for what they've done and what they're doing. And I'm saying, no, I'm very concerned. So I could be looking at someone who's at the bottom and thinking, oh my God, this has got an amazing trajectory of where it's going. And I could look at someone who's at the top and be very concerned. So that's because when you've got critical thinking skills and you've got no noise yourself, you can observe other people's noise in a very effective way. You can forecast. That's really what psychic phenomena is, and prescient ability is the ability to forecast and see things that others can't see, because you're not congested, you're not constricted, you don't have an agenda. That's why, it's usually, parents have a harder time counseling their kids or advising their kids than, someone from the outside, just because the other person isn't invested in the same way, isn't threatened in the same way, isn't identified in the same way. So,
just kind of going along, just circling back those two threads though, because I don't want to pass over those too fast, right? I think one is. Did I actually finish what I was saying?
Yeah,
you did. Yeah, you were there. You were there. I think one of the things that the people that you go to, the mentors, right, that you trust. Something you said was people are always surprised when you're not showing up as your essence.
Yes.
Yeah, but you might be, right? You think that, under your own, survival system, that you're just being you. But when you show up reactive, you're actually kind of throwing up on people, which is another thing you said, which I really like, because it's very visceral, A, and B, it kind of speaks to the fact that you just don't know how you occur. And then the second thing I really liked that you talked about was people getting rewarded by the culture for their survival, right? Could totally be on
for bad behavior.
Yeah, they could be on the decline completely.
Yes. Yeah.
And then the culture saying, yeah, go, but they're headed towards a bottom, right? So, so not listening to your mentors or not listening to people you trust about not showing up and really being you. That's a wrong turn for a lot of people. And I love that piece of this thread, which is why I wanted to circle back real quick. Because where we're going, which is, how does freedom show up, right? And what does that look like? And how does freedom look between yourself and another person, right? And I think giving people more of a sense of, well, if I have reactive and I'm not showing up like I should, but what does freedom look like when I'm showing up?
Yeah, I mean, that is an ongoing conversation for the rest of your life. And people, when they talk about a journey, most people interpret that as a destination. They really do think, they listen when you say journey, like, oh, you mean destination? Like, I will get somewhere someday. You will get somewhere. Yeah. I'm just saying. I mean, I call this the kind of Johnny Depp School of Arrested Development, right? Yeah. Or the Mel Gibson School of Arrested Development, meaning what looked like great in the 80s might not look so great in 2023. And understanding that you're constantly evolving, constantly expanding, constantly moving and growing and discovering is part of life's process. And I see it as things being left or the letting go of something, more the loss of something as time goes on, because that's really what freedom would be, is that you're less burdened by things, you're less burdened by stuff. That doesn't mean you can't have a beautiful home, or you can't have, I don't know, a yacht or whatever you need, right? You can't have, it's just, does that have you or do you have it? So I'm always looking at life in that very Buddhist way of that you're constantly relinquishing the things that hold you hostage, the things that have had you, the identities, the way you needed to be seen, the way that people need to see you. So freedom is really that ongoing process of letting go. And so that you have more mobility, more movement in the world. And you have to do due diligence on those things that do hold you hostage. So, whether it's, some people are their cars, some people are their houses, some people are their, the people they date. And those things always have a finite value. At some point they'll get bankrupt, right? And most people don't recognize what's bankrupt soon enough or fast enough.
Yeah. And one of the earlier episodes we talked about.
I don't know if I answered the question.
No, you did. I think it's because I'm thinking about what keeps people in that downward spiral, even so the culture's cheering them on, they're and you're in the case that you talked about that client that he's on their way down, even though they're at the peak of their career.
People usually, like even therapists, people go to someone who's going to support their point of view, or coaches. They don't go to someone who's going to actually reflect a truth, or give them some real authentic reflection that gives them an opportunity to pivot, change, grow. And I'm including professions, I'm including partners, I'm including your own characteristics,
relationships,
because you could be looking at lots of different things that need a pivot. Some things, and some pivots are dramatic, like really dramatic, like you were thinking you're a writer when in fact you're an educator. I don't know, or you're thinking that you should be in real estate when you can't stand looking at houses. I don't know, right? That you're doing it as a default, not the same way that I described the other default, but you're doing that as an option as opposed to a passion. And so those are whole other stories. Of like, how do you determine what you're passionate about, what's creative, what you kind of should be doing, what's your calling? All those conversations are included in any kind of coach-player relationship.
The thread that runs through that for me is the conversation around loss, and I think we talked about that in earlier episodes around if you can't lose a relationship, that relationship will hold you hostage.
Yeah, absolutely.
But similar, that can be applied to lots of things. It could be career, right? It could be, so those people that are holding to an option, they might be afraid of losing that for some reason, whatever that might be, to be able to pursue their passion or to be able to make that pivot that they need to make.
Well, you look at people who are really effective, and some people it looks like sociopathic, not actually authentic or healthily integrated. It's that they can't lose somewhere. But people who are really freed up or liberated in whatever area, whether it be money goes down and they take advantage of that in the market, or that they have the ability, doesn't mean they don't feel the loss. They don't have the psychological attachment. If someone leaves, they feel and miss the person, but they don't lose themselves, right? Just because they lost something. And so, but loss for me is really the key to most of the kingdom. And I just look and see when I'm working with people, like, what are they afraid to lose? And I mean, I'm talking dramatic things, like where people have lost children. I mean, dramatic, horrific, the hardest things in the world, right? And yet the person has somehow integrated the loss. And what people don't really understand, and this is maybe one of the most sophisticated distinctions in the kind of the pattern of a human being is, or the tapestry of a human being. I was looking for the exact word that I thought might really explain it. Is people confuse their feelings with a psychological commentary. So they might think like, I'm never getting, like, what, I'm done with this person, or I'm done with that, or I don't believe in this, or I don't care about that, or doing this. And it could be a profound loss they're having. They don't know that they act like that's the end of a conversation, that it's a conclusive statement, rather than that's a beginning of a conversation to a world of feelings. And feelings are always generative, creative, productive, and healing. They're always liberating when you get to a feeling. It's why grief is such a profound feeling that liberates, because it's the full acceptance of a truth of a loss. That's what grief is. The full acceptance of some truth of a loss, that you finally or physiologically get that. And so but people confuse as I said, their conclusions, their commentary with the end of a conversation rather than the beginning of a conversation. And then they're left with the psychological reaction about whatever that is, which doesn't yield any release, doesn't doesn't give the person any access to a different way of being. And I've watched people get stuck, obviously, after a major loss in that loss. So they're now identified as the loss, as that's the end of the conversation, rather than I've watched people who actually have allowed that to enter into be a portal to their feelings, where they're now finally liberated and they're freed up. And it doesn't mean they don't have profound feelings and heartbreak. They also but they don't have the psychological wound that keeps them stuck, in the past in that particular way. Right. And people confuse that. They go, well, how are you getting over this? And you don't get over a loss. You integrate a loss so that it alchemizes into a contribution. So people keep trying to get over something rather than get into something. So there's all these fundamental counterintuitive ways of thinking that actually give you access to creativity, freedom, self-expression, mobility, movement. But there's also these cultural constrictions that keep you stuck, in a particular way.
And I'm still very, very thankful for this. And I look at my marriage. One of the most difficult lessons I had was when I was dealing with a lot of just intimate relationship challenges, is getting to the fact where I could actually not communicate because I was so afraid of losing my wife, right? And I was afraid of saying the wrong thing. And so it really kept my voice pretty much silent. I wasn't going to speak up. I wasn't going to say something that could be dangerous, that could be, something I really felt and getting to the loss of like truly feeling like I might lose my wife when I communicate, and getting to have to move through that. I found all the feelings, like you said, and the communication on the other side. And what you helped us do, or helped me do particularly, is making those communications. Is I thought our marriage was over. I was going to say what I was going to say, and on the other side of that, our relationship is completely transformed, and we are more in love today, and we're more connected today than we were in any time I can think about in our marriage. And my fear of communicating, which was hidden by that fear of losing my wife, which is what you're talking to directly. That is still one of the most significant, help. I don't even call it lessons, teachings that you've helped me get through over the years, and I'm so thankful for it even today. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful, and
I mean, obviously, testimony and witnessing is a significant part of evolution and transformation. So I appreciate what you said, Brian, because there's a testimony to that. People think it's about, the person when you're saying, I'm thankful to this person. And that's, it's great. And I'm appreciative of that. Right. But it's more about the testimony that you're making yourself, and you're anchoring in those pillars that have allowed for this evolution and this realization and the
it's a different way of being.
Right. So that's why testimony is so important. Acknowledgement and appreciation of others is more a statement for you to anchor in those powerful lessons and powerful pieces that allow you to really build an entirely different foundation as well. This is it's maybe a little bit off the subject, but I think it's germane just because you just introduced that, is that we're talking about relationships and we're talking about how people are afraid to lose, and where they get allied, and they call love, they call codependency love. People confuse all sorts of things, and attachment with love. My 16-year-old daughter, she was dating this guy, and she was becoming more despondent. She was becoming less motivated. She was becoming this, and those are signs like that your relationship's not working, right? But people keep staying in love. No, I'm in love. There's this amazing Billie Eilish song that she used to play over and over again. I don't know if she's playing it as much, right? I took her to school. I took her on her way to school, and it's called TV. And it's so brilliant. That kid is amazing, Billie Eilish.
Yeah, she is. Yeah, she's a brilliant kid.
The lyrics are so mature and smart for someone so young. And she's talking about how she's lost her friends, and her friends are like, she goes, but I guess that's what being in love means. And it's so well done, right? Because the irony is that, no, that's not what love is. Love is inclusive. It's not exclusive. And love's got lots of different elements. So I was watching my daughter get more despondent. And so she finally on her own kind of broke it up. She goes, I really loved him, but I just wasn't doing well. So I don't know if that's really love. And she had played that Billie Eilish song. So I think even that was a real support for her, because we find lessons in music, we find lessons in literature, we find lessons in our friends, we find lessons in people, we find lessons in observation. But I wanted to talk about this thing called a perpetration.
Okay. Yeah.
For a second. So a perpetration is something that you do or don't do, something you say or don't say that kills off another person. So, like, let's say you cheat on your wife or on your husband, right? So, unless you have an open marriage, right, or something else, cheating by definition means you don't have the agreement. It's a violation, betrayal of some sort. So, a perpetration is something you do or don't do. So that would be something you do, like I'm cheating, right? Or don't do, like I'm not gonna, I'm not going to pay the bills and not tell that, right? So,
that could be as well.
So something you do or don't do, something you say or don't say. So where someone like is gossiping about a friend of yours and you don't stand up for them.
Yeah.
So something you say or don't say, something you do or don't do, that's a perpetration. It's a violation of the relationship, right? On some level.
Okay. Yeah.
So the nature of perpetration is that you now have a secret. The secret is that you cheated, or the secret is that you didn't pay the bills, or the secret is that you gossiped about someone. You now have a secret from that person. And
interesting. Yeah.
And you are now maintaining, and now the secret becomes more important than the relationship. And the person who's dangerous to the secret is the person you have the secret from. That's your intimate relationship. So you've got to kill off that person because they could discover that secret. And I've watched so many relationships break up from that place of where the secret becomes more important than reveal, which is what you just mentioned. When you revealed the loss or the concern of the loss, or like you're not afraid to lose, then the person actually, and I've got many examples for myself personally about this, when I actually revealed something, and I was kind of confronting, I am going to lose this relationship. There's no question. That was the thought in my head, right? And then when I revealed the secret and revealed the thing, I actually gained the relationship and repaired something and began the repair. But that's what a perpetration is it's a secret, a betrayal that now the person who's dangerous to you is the person who you're keeping the secret from, and you must kill them off because the secret is more paramount than the relationship. And I've watched people break up families and break up things and then they have all this regret, like, why didn't I just reveal that and do that? And it's a strange human habit, right?
Yeah.
But it's very human.
Yeah.
And so that's what Mo was saying. Secrets are, with my kids, secrets are deadly. Right? They just are. And people don't realize that. And people don't have, in terms of, I don't know if we introduced even the core confusions, in a.
Well, no, I was going to introduce that just a second ago.
In a previous podcast, but a core confusion is secret and confidentiality. Secret is designed to pin you and to engage your animal, if you will, that we talked about, the animal of survival, and pin you somewhere and stick you somewhere. Like when someone gossips about someone else and pins you, it's designed to separate you in a certain way. And confidentiality is something you can hear and hold and doesn't have you, right? So in the area of confidentiality, you have the information. In the area of secret, the information has you. Yeah. And that's the difference, right? Everything's the difference between what you have and what has you.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I think I'm going to maybe finish our conversation today because we've covered a lot of ground. But I was going to ask you if you wanted to finish with your famous or favorite Janis Joplin quote about freedom.
Oh yeah, is it? I don't know if it's Janis Joplin or not, but I'm sure it is.
Yeah, right? It might be. Then we could look at it later.
Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. That's
beautiful.
Yeah, it's just beautiful. It's so true. I was also listening to, because I think I want to do something for my son's birthday about like do a singing video, because even though I can't
Yeah.
sing, I do all these singing videos and I can't sing, right? But I like to do them because they're totally entertaining to me.
Well, they're fun, yeah, brilliant.
And they're fun, right? And I was just listening to Beautiful, like the Beautiful Boy. I think it's called Beautiful Boy by John Lennon.
Yeah.
Right. And one of the lines in there is that life is what happens when you're busy making other plans.
That, yeah.
And I mean, that's just brilliant. Right. And it's so true that when we allow for life to dictate us with the level of no noise and no commentary, and allow for the ease, there's an effortless too, as it kind of pivots us all over the place, subtle pivots, dramatic pivots, all of us. But when we're trying to force something or prove something or drive something, you should be suspicious, right? And people are always wanting to be something they're not, and always wanting to be seen as something that they're not. I mean, the good news is it gives me a job for life, right? Thank God, right? Because I don't know what I'd do if if people weren't screwed up.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
it gives me a lot of hobby as well, because if I didn't have this, what would I do with my free time?
Yeah, I think you have a few more skills than I do, Brian.
So, look, Brackett, thank you very much. I love today's topic. Yeah, freedom is living like you have nothing left to lose. So, yeah, it's a great place to park it, and we'll come back and expand much more. And I think the core confusions, you're going to talk about that. So let's go back and talk about the core series and maybe some of the future episodes, and tear that, because that's a great way to look at this, right? Between your essence and behavior, and trying to figure out where you sit as you move through life. And I love your distinctions there. So we'll get to more of that in the future episodes. Thanks.
Sounds good.
This has been a Gradients production.